people, welcome to Blue K Jazz Dance. Welcome to Blue K Jazz Dance, a miseducation of UK Jazz Dance Part 3. I want to share with people what incentivized me as a dancer to become an educationalist was this gentleman called Sir Roy Blackman. Sir Roy Blackman was my academic coach from the age of 8 years old to the age of 26. He was my rehabilitation coach. He was my business coach. He was my education consultant for projects as an individual. He gave me was my consultant how to direct my UK jazz dance development into an educational format. And it led to, he was a secretary of this organization. This organization, he had a master's in education, I should say that. He created an amazing linguistics program. He taught me English as a second language, English for special purposes. Basically, if you've seen the film called The King's Speech, he was that person. He used experimental ways with me as an individual. He was a secretary of the National Anti-Racist Movement in Education. And what happened, this is an important conference I want to share with individuals. So I was involved in that through him. He wanted me to create programs to do with anti-racism through dance. And I did it through my dancing as a person, as an individual. So when you see information, you see things like this, you see information like this, my educational work was guided by him as an individual. He helped me to get resources. He tested me to see, what my style was as an individual, what I was actually dispersing, sharing as a dancer was important to him as an individual. But I want to share with you what happened in 1995. What happened was I was part of artists was doing anti-racist work, and I was part of multicultural education in Britain as an individual, and that was one of the directives of why I'm still dancing. What happened, this was important, this is 1995, people, a conference that took place in Coventry, an education and black community. One of the concerns that the black community had, and why the teachers, was there was a deal that was made by the government. There's going to be wider participation, the partnership with education, with parents. We look at the wider participation, part of partnership between parents, teachers and managers, and which would include children and young people in different ways. What happened, the educational system was opening up itself to really look at education from a perspective where parents had an influence. Because what was happening was black children were being miseducated by the system, the books that they were reading, the programs were making them feel inferior. And what happening was they had artists who were coming outside, who were coming from a non-educational background, were bringing in a expert knowledge of dance. So basically, I was providing expert knowledge in dance on UK jazz dance to young people. So that's why I said this is why this program was in, and I was led by the consultant Sir Roy Blackman. This is me doing work with white children. I'm talking about racism, talking about anti-racism, talking about what can happen, etc., etc. Wasn't people's fault, because some of the things that happen, white people can feel guilty for having racist ideology or whatever, but it's not their fault because they were taught at an impressionable age. At this age, it was why some of this work Mr. Blackman taught me to do at early learning or child learning years, because people are, they're impressionable years that marked when people, so if they've seen a black person that spoke about racism in an open way, what happens is it enables them in the future to be able to speak about racism, discriminations, anti-racism in an objective way, which has happened in the UK. That's what multicultural education did. And what happened, one of the greatest things as an artist, what happened was the educational system after in about 2000, what happened was black artists were not being brought into the school no more. And so what happened, the books that young people were actually engaging in, particularly to do with it'll come to me. What happened, particularly to do with our arts, was that basically a lot of information is a miseducation. And that's why I noted Oxford Press has a lot to answer for. Manchester Press has a lot to answer for. You have to understand there was a time of colonialization, and in the time of colonialization, Oxford, before colonialization, even talked before racism began, remember Oxford Press started very, very early printing books. So we have to understand that history was one where slavery was around and one where colonialization was around. So they spread negatives about black and Asian minority groups, and them long-held stereotypes are still here. So one of the key things I've talked about with young people before I speak to them, talk about stereotypes, e.g. all black people are natural at dancing. No, we're not. And I spoke about me having 2 left feet, as an individual. I talked about me being shy. We talked about me, the individuals having special education needs. I used to feel ashamed of an individual. We're supposed to be natural dancers, actors, and athletes. I wasn't. I had to work hard. So these are some of the things that people had. I talked about stereotypes as part of my anti-racist movement, because generally people got stereotypes about individuals. I asked people, where do you think I come from? Most people said Jamaica. I identified, well, I was born in Britain, but my dad's Jamaican and mum's Grenadian. Where's Grenada? People said Grenada. They know Grenada, Spain, but don't know Grenada in the Caribbean. And so I took them through a journey. Oh, this is where I come from. This is what my mother does. Because they don't have that conceptuality. Their perception of Caribbeans that they have no history, they come from slavery, which is important. So, and me working with Mr. Blackman deepened my analysis of the way that I would engage people. And I was very excellent at doing what I was doing. And then I went on to do anti-racist insets for teachers, because that was important. Because we couldn't be there 24/7. I talked about what's the first thing to do. I created with Mr. Blackman the first thing called Student Empowering Students. I talked about stereotypes. What are the stereotypes we have about each other? We have to start from here. Not that you tell me about your singing. What's the stereotypes? And I can break the stereotypes here in this room. And that was a great breaker to engage people, because people realize the stereotypes. And I know people said, some people tried to say that they have stereotypes. And how I could challenge that, I said to individuals, what are people's names in this room and what do they mean? So Asian names mean something. African names mean something. Caribbean names, you have to understand, don't necessarily, people weren't chosen for the meaning of them. And that's what people need to understand. But in Asia, names mean something. They're chosen for a purpose. In Ghana, for example, names are chosen from the day that you're born. On the day that you're born. So you know, since it was born on a Sunday. Do you understand? American names, some people chose it for a reason. For example, some of the names, but some people weren't. Some people chose names, and said in the context, Edward, because of King Edward. Anne, because of Princess Anne. Do you understand? Right. So, I'm not saying it's not done, but there's some names born for a purpose, direct a person's life. In Ghana or in Nigeria, they have names that mean something, which is important for people to understand. So I had an amazing way to engage young people in widening their own engagement, in broadening their horizons to explore themselves, stereotypes, etc. And the impact. What's the impact? If you're told someone's dumb, you treat them as dumb, don't you? If you talked about people in the slums as these people who are uncouth, who are unruly, they don't have no discipline, would you treat them and look at them in a respectful manner? No, you wouldn't. So I talked about Germany and what the Germans did to the Jews. So what happens, you broaden their history, because you see, racism is not a black thing. And what happens is most kids think it is, especially white kids. Blue Cage Jazz, that's out. Take it easy.